Hello and welcome to the webinar titled Delivering Value from RPA Initiatives in Government Agencies, hosted by Newgen, a global software vendor with products and solutions in the space of BPM, ECM, and CCM, with majority customers in banking and government domain. And joined by Forrester, a leading technology and market research company. I am Darshak Parmar and I shall be your host and coordinator for the webinar today. Our speakers today are Craig Le Clair from Forrester, followed by Arpan Bansal from Newgen Software. Craig is a vice president and distinguished principal analyst who is an internationally recognized expert in helping companies transform from manual and analog processes to the mobile, digital, and cognitive world. Arpan is a head of Center of Excellence for Government Vertical at Newgen. Arpan is responsible for high-end consulting and solution roadmap for government space. At the end of these two presentations, we'll be having questions and answer session. We request you to type your questions in your GoToWebinar questions window during any time while the session is on. And we will take them up one by one at the end of the session with our experts. Now, passing it over to Craig.
Thank you. Great to be here and great to talk about this subject. So I'll do show my screen here. So, should I show my PowerPoint? I asked you this before, or should I just be able to change it?
That's right, Craig. You can just make your PowerPoint full screen and we can get started.
Okay. Okay. Okay, so delivering value from RPA initiatives targeted at government, but we're going to talk about a few different areas. So I like to start with just a little bit of definitions. There's a lot of new language associated with the strong and fast development of the robotic process automation market. We distinguish between attended RPA and unattended. Now, attended, you think of it just simply as when a software bot, which is something that's doing some work on behalf of a human, is interacting with that human. And that's generally associated with a contact center where an agent might be starting a bot via drop-down menu, or maybe the bot is sending a question or advice to an agent. So there's an interaction with a human. It really augments the human's activities, accelerates their activity by doing a lot of background processes. Unattended is a little bit different. It doesn't run as focused on the desktop. It really runs more as a batch process, and it takes over the entire desktop. So think of a human being there 1 minute doing what should be a low value and repetitive task, and now you have a bot, a software script that's dispatched and does that and performs that work in more of a complete fashion. So we call that unattended, and that's usually associated with the back office. Now, RPA really has come up as an automation technology, and we'll talk about why it's gaining a lot of traction. And it very much complements some of the traditional automations that we've known about for quite a while. Probably the most important one is business process management. So think of it like this. RPA is used to harvest tasks that might be coordinated by a more end-to-end process orchestration, which would be managed by the BPM software. So one day you had humans that were maybe working off a queue where that queue was managed by the BPM application. And when you implement RPA is now working off that queue the same way the human was. So it's very, very, it's complementary. BPM platforms have much more capabilities built in to build a process application. So they have a environment to design a user interface. They have a design environment to look at how data is coordinated from databases to content management systems and how that is orchestrated, accessed from a process. It has a whole environment for, of course, mapping processes and visualizing the overall end-to-end process. RPA is very focused on desktop competencies. Really understanding how to control a desktop, how to manipulate applications on a desktop that a human was manipulating before. So it's more narrow in its focus, but the combination is quite powerful. The reason that it's really gained traction, we think, at Forrester over the last few years is because companies have been struggling to show progress towards digital transformation. BPM projects, tend to be about really modernizing, creating a new process, and that takes time. RPA doesn't focus on modernization as much as it focuses on filling gaps and legacy holes in existing processes that give you some level of efficiency. Very different, but it's really providing a lot of value, as we'll talk about in a minute. And here are some of the use cases that we're seeing all the time. They're spread into these 4 quadrants because they have different characteristics. The ROI rich area is where you have transactions that are in high volume and are pretty repetitive. These might be associated with business account onboarding. It might be in IT service area where you're doing application testing. So you build bots that actually test the different paths for the software. That's been going on for quite a while. We talk about the bonus territory in the upper right, and that really is bonus because when you combine RPA with more intelligence, more analytics, it becomes much more powerful. So if you can take bots and have their activity directed from text analytics or content analytics that's understanding meaning out of document sets, out of emails, then it can create the kind of structured files that RPA likes to work with. So that's a very, very high value application now, the combination of text analytics and RPA. It's also a very high value when you can use bots to augment chatbots that are interacting with humans, either in a call center environment, interacting with customers, or they're interacting with employees. So the RPA bots then are taking instruction from the chatbot as to what to do, and that can be going into core systems, which again, that's what RPA does really well. It can go into core systems without using data integration or APIs. It just knows how to go through the existing clients to the core systems as if they were a human. So oftentimes you can take forms and grab the right forms with the bot. You can fill out the forms with going into core systems. You can send out notifications. You can load the forms to a website for a customer. So the combination of chatbots and RPA is a good one. These are just some of the use cases. Now, when you look at the government, which is the focus here, there are thousands of use cases within government, and we break them into these areas here. They're investigative. Governments have a responsibility to provide information to their citizens. So being able to go in and gather those information requests to access the information, to compile it, create a report that may go out to a citizen. That's typical. A lot of auditing that's going on in government. That's a very typical use case in government. Incidents, police, fire, complaint management. Complaint management, unfortunately, is a big category. Homeland security, dispute resolution. These are all very common functions within government, and RPA has a role to be able to do the background work that frees the government worker, to maybe not be as tired and maybe grouchy from having to do a lot of low value tasks. They can focus more on really helping the citizen. So that's really, really important. And of course, in the service request area, you have claims. There are lots of claims, disability claims, youth services, child support, aging and disability services, the ability to grab information, to have a digital worker, go off and go into 5 or 6 different applications, check someone's background, validate that they're appropriate for a particular submission. These are all things, licensing and permitting. All of these things have a lot of repeating tasks for which RPA is really, really good, at. This is an example. I know we're talking mostly to the APAC region this morning, but this is from the U.S. government. This is NASA, which is obviously a very well-known agency, and they have a digital worker. They've named their digital workers. Some organizations find that the software robot is more acceptable to the workers if it has some human characteristics. So in this case, they've named the robot there on the left, Washington. And Washington works very hard, 7 by 24. It has got a password and access, as all these bots do, which is a concern in many particularly regulated environments that Newgen's familiar with in financial services and in government. You're giving these bots human credentials, so you have to be really careful about how you manage that. So they essentially have unique identification. They have an email address in this case. Now, what this agency does is they actually bill the different segments of the agency for the use of the digital worker on a per minute basis. So Washington charges about 12 cents a minute to do various work. And very successfully deployed. These are real numbers. I've redacted some of the actual cost numbers on the right, but it's really a lot of RPA is justified based on the number of hours that are human hours of work that are taken out of a business process. So here you see some pretty typical RPA processes in government: invoice processing, billings and collections, travel vouchers, training, award processing. And you see the annual transaction volume. And as we'll talk about, RPA is very effective when you have 2 things. You have a relatively simple task that you can harvest, as it's called. And I'll explain what simple means in a minute. But there are 3 aspects of simple. I call them the 3 fives. There are 5 decisions or less in the process. There are 5 applications accessed or less, and there are 500 clicks or data entry strokes. If you can find tasks that are that simple, you can build a bot relatively easily to do that. And if they're in high transaction volume, as you see here on this chart, then it's a home run. It's a very, very strong ROI, as we'll look at in a minute. Now here's some more use cases. These are ones that we know of at Forrester and in the APAC region. Have some mail processing that's really dealing with the reduction in transactional and direct mail that a lot of posts around the world are dealing with. So what they're doing is they're substituting digital workers to offset the lower volumes that they have. The Sumitomo Group is one of the largest worldwide general trading companies. I'm sure you're well aware of it, very diversified. They've really had hundreds of millions of dollars of savings. They've had massive corporate restructuring using RPA as a catalyst for that. It wasn't the only thing that technology that was applied, but it was the most important one. So very, very successful. Deluxi Electric, they make a whole variety of electrical products. 5,000 value-added tax invoices to more than 600 clients, nationwide monthly, and they were able to trim the tax invoice time significantly, as you can see. You can see some of the numbers there. I won't read them, but a human needs 20 minutes to do this particular function. The bot was able to do it in, in 5, which actually seems kind of slow to me. Once you put a bot on something, it's usually much faster than that. You have, this is New Zealand Ministry of Primary Industries, which takes care of all of the fishing rights and farming and animal welfare and biosecurity, forestry sector, and a whole set of background tasks that are done in the licensing and registration, creating reports and monitoring. So very, very, very strong, use of it. This is a little more on Sumitomo. Compliance and risk operations was one of the key areas. Notification of suspicious transactions, a lot of information gathering. You find this as a common use case because of RPA's talent of going into core systems. It's often a very inexpensive way to gather information that you might have had to do a real IT project to do before. You might have had to create APIs and do a data integration, and perhaps the legacy system that you were accessing didn't have any APIs at all. So this idea of data pooling is very, very important to RPA. Preparing performance reports, as you see in branch operations, deposit management, exchanges, and loans. So basically, it's these simple processes, that are very, very recurring and very, very repetitive. Now, desktop RPA, that's what we called attended before. This is a group that had large operational volumes, reductions of approximately 200 operations, just 650,000 hours, extracted from the operation. And that's just the beginning. They expect 1 million hours of capacity to be, generated by the application of the RPA technology. These are shared services. One of the key areas for RPA are really the services that every organization of any size has. That has to do with invoice processing, in the utility segment, electricity bill payment, processing electricity bills, in SAP. A lot of RPA works around Oracle and SAP environments and and against legacy systems. So just a lot of really, really strong results there. This is a chart that may be helpful to you because finance and accounting, is one of the primary areas that RPA can be applied to. And this just shows you in different process areas within finance and accounting, where has RPA had the highest impact in terms of extracting hours. So you see that monthly and quarterly closing of the books. You're entering data into a general ledger. Sometimes your back office people are buried in spreadsheets doing that. Consolidations, reconciliation, purchasing, purchase to pay. These are areas that organizations have done process assessment, done POCs, applied RPA, and had really, really good results. Now, this is just some numbers for you. Now, these are a synthesized set of numbers and ranges. So if you recall, we talked about attended operations, which are more augmenting a person who is on the phone in the contact center. You don't get as high a productivity because you're really you're accelerating their work. You're maybe kicking off a bot, the human is, to update addresses in 4 or 5 different systems. So you get a good, now that means 0.4 to 1.2. What does that mean? Well, it means that for the bot that may cost $15,000, $20,000 to build, and it may cost $15,000, $20,000 a year to support the automation. How many full-time equivalents, how many people are you augmenting? How many hours can you extract from that? So you see in the unattended world, in the back office, a bot that costs $20,000, $15,000, the range for offset is between 2 full-time equivalents and 3.5. So that means if a full-time equivalent is worth 2,000 hours a year in terms of labor, that means you're, for $20,000, $30,000 a year, you're saving, 4,000 to 7,000 hours That's the kind of returns that we're seeing. Yeah, but again, you have to find processes that meet the rule of 5. That have a relatively small number of decisions, because the decisions, unlike a BPM solution, where the rules are embedded in a rules engine in the BPM solution, or there's an external rules capability. The rules and the decisions that are done by the bot are statically programmed into the bot. So when you get to have too many decisions, the bot gets too complicated and becomes too expensive to maintain. Yeah. So this is an important aspect. The number of applications is important. You shouldn't have more than 5, 7, or 8 at the most, maybe 10 applications. And this means that the bot, which does a lot of swivel chair work, as they say, it's going into one application. It's taking that information, it's putting it into an Excel. It's maybe doing a calculation in Excel, and it's going into another application, and it's entering data. The number of applications, when it gets too high, the bot maintenance cost becomes too high, because the bots are sensitive to changes to the application. Unlike APIs exist, in their own world below the application. They're not sensitive to application changes, which is why, for some longer term, they're better and safer. But if you have a change, if you change a website, a page from page 2 to page 7, that's going to affect the bot performance. It might break the bot. So the more applications you have involved, the more you're sensitive to high maintenance costs for bots. Now, there are a lot of developments in the RPA world. We just completed a full review of 15 platforms for that that are making the application changes and the bot maintenance a lot simpler and better, by the bot being able to use analytics to understand the change and actually to start to repair itself. We're not quite there yet, but that's where it's going. So, but you have to be sensitive to that. Now, I did talk about analytics and RPA. I talked about that as the bonus area. These are a survey that we did to really look at where are companies finding value in combining RPA with AI. And this is the results that we got. The number 1 area was the second area here, actually, unstructured content with text analytics. Again, looking at documents, looking at emails, using machine learning-based text analytics to understand that unstructured content, to extract fields, place them into structured fields that then the bot can do things with. Bots don't work on unstructured content directly. You have to normalize the unstructured content in a way the bot can deal with it. But the combination is very, very good. You can correct errors that you see in forms and documents that are coming in, which is very important for government because you have lots of forms, lots of people filling out forms all the time. When you have errors in those forms and they go to the back office process, they're very expensive to fix. The bots can, with text analytics, can understand the errors. They can correlate one field on a form with another and see that there's inconsistencies, and the bot can then notify the citizen and get that fixed right at the front of the process. So that's just one example. IoT is also very important, particularly some of the smartest cities in the world are in APAC. Some of the work you're doing is really wonderful to create cleaner, more sustainable, smarter cities. And it's a lot about sensors. It's a lot about putting sensors in the garbage cans on the streets, understanding when they need to be emptied, and so forth. Bike sharing programs and so forth. It's really about sensors. But RPA fits into the right here in that with its ability to access legacy systems, you can get better usage of the sensor data you're getting in IoT. You can combine IoT with predictive analytics and maintain your assets better. So you can understand that there's a potential failure, And then RPA can go into the legacy system and dispatch workers or order parts or do the things, so you create more of an end-to-end process. So that's one we're seeing very important in government long term. And I mentioned the chatbots supporting employees, RPA supporting employees or supporting chatbots that customers are interacting with. Now, I mentioned the Forrester review that we did, and that hit our website today. In fact, these are just some of the structure that we used to look at the various RPA platforms, and the stars indicate things that really have accelerated in importance in just 1 year since we first analyzed the category. A lot of importance I mentioned in text analytics, desktop analytics, which very simply are the understanding of the human's interaction with the machine, which is the basis of designing the bot, but understanding it more than just a simple recording, of being able to understand patterns that might be good to automate. Getting to that that golden process that has the rule of fives. You have the analytics to find and understand those processes. So desktop analytics has become more and more important. Application change management, that's the issue of the bot maintenance that I talked about, so that's getting better. And a lot around deployment efficiency and scale. As we've matured in the RPA market, companies have gotten more experience. They're out of the POC phase. They're now trying to support a shared service for digital workers, which is means that I can support a number of different agencies or departments with a single RPA platform. So to do that, you have to do a number of things. RPA governance has really become more important as more digital workers are accelerating throughout a government organization. You have to treat them almost like humans. You have to know when the digital worker was created, who they report to, which is usually the person that's responsible for their credentials and credential management. When do they be terminated? What has been their training? What's their performance review? The proper way to do RPA governance is to think of them in some ways the way you think of a human who is onboarded and has a boss and so forth. So a lot of the platforms have created more life cycle vision and versioning and management of the digital worker, which has been good. So this is just a very, very quick overview of some of the things. Overall, we've seen that maturity is pretty low in really dealing with things like governance and things like scale, being able to partition a control tower capability to manage the bots, but provision it for use independently by 5 or 6 different departments or agencies. Most organizations are really at level 1 and 2, exploratory or initial vendor evaluation. 10% are in 3, POCs and pilots. But really, when you look at level 6, with a full-blown operating model, an automation center, having combined RPA with analytics in an interesting way, the maturity is relatively low. Now, this is just a confusing slide, so apologies about that, but you may want to look at this at your leisure. This is, how are companies really struggling with building an operating model? This automation looks good, it looks promising. How do I build an organization to really support it? And that's been a struggle for a lot of organizations. Partially because the momentum for pushing the technology is coming from the business. It's not coming from technology management. So on the other hand, you have all of these interesting security issues. You have deployment efficiency issues and so forth, infrastructure issues. So technology management's a huge role in successful deployment. So this is what's called a federated model. It means that you have design capability in the business, and you have a control capability or a control filter in technology management, that you let the business design the bot, but then before the bot goes into production, you have to meet these 10 points in our report that's really important. Things like business continuity and security, and is it a proper process to apply robotics to? And so ultimately the control has to be with technology management for that. So this is just a pattern that we're seeing evolve. Some companies don't like this; they want everything centralized. Some have business segments that are so huge that they're doing everything in the business. If you have a contact center in Australia, for example, Telstra. There are 30,000 agents that are working with 140 different desktop accelerators, bots. They're such a large organization. They have their own automation team, their own center of excellence. They do all control and all design. But most of organizations I talk to are going towards this more balanced operating model. So that's really, I'll leave you just with this last slide. Digital workforce growth blurs human and robot treatment. This is really going back to that concept of governing the digital worker, much like you would a human. And we are going to see this, this sort of pattern developing over time. It's a little scary, in a sense, but if you have software that's pretending to be humans, and you want to meet compliance, and governance properly, take the things you've learned in working with humans for many years, and apply them to the technology as well. So with that, I'll just summarize. Remember the rule of fives. Look for simple processes in high volume. Think more broadly about the process. So it's RPA is just one automation. There's BPM, there's case management, there's low-code platforms. There's a lot of different automations in different areas: industrial automation, infrastructure automation. RPA can help in a lot of areas, but it's just one aspect of that. View RPA as kind of a stepping stone to analytics. So try to find those bonus territories where you can find a bot, you can find an RPA, you can find some task harvesting, but look for those places where the bot, the digital worker, can get smarter over time. That's really the key. And build an operational model that works for you. So thank you very much. I'm going to turn it back over to our friends at Newgen.
Thank you, Craig. That was really exciting to see the potential of RPA technology has in store. Now I'll bring Arpan as a speaker.
Hi, good morning to all of you. Here is a quick overview of Newgen. We have about 450 active customers spread across 61 countries in more than 20 verticals. We primarily offer software products in the areas of enterprise content management, business process management, case management, and customer communication management space. We have several large implementations in BFSI and public sector globally. I'll highlight some of them, including some marquee customers in Singapore towards the end of this presentation. We have very strong partner ecosystem of about 240 partners worldwide, and we are rated as leaders in the recent ECM and TCM reports from Forrester. And worth highlighting that we are the only company worldwide which is featuring in all 4 magic quadrants: ECM, BPM, CCM, and case management from Gartner. Now, as it was said in the last presentation, that RPA and BPM complements each other. But our experience strongly suggests that in the area of digital transformation, where we are actually looking at the processes and around the processes and how to modernize these processes, our experience strongly suggests that RPA initiative is incomplete without BPM. See, when it comes to monitoring, measurement, and improvement, organizations don't monitor isolated individual activities. They monitor a process, and activity is a part of it. A simple example in the context of RPA automation could be the exceptions or discrepancies that occur during activities performed by bot. And now the exception needs human intervention, and it should be assigned properly and it should be tracked to the closure. So if you see from a holistic perspective, governance, reporting, audit trail, monitoring, all is needed to be done at the process level, in which the activity is a part. So here, for the sake of explaining it well and keep this context throughout this presentation, what I'm going to do is that I am going to use the word RPM, and the intent is that it represents a combination of the capabilities of RPA plus BPM, and this is where the organizations are able to leverage the potential of these technologies to maximum. Now, as part of overall digital transformation, organizations are now adopting an approach where all routine and mundane activities are automated through bots, which not only reduces cost, save time, and bring in consistency, but also frees up time for knowledge workers to put their time in more valuable tasks, maybe things like interfacing with more and more with the customers. So here is how it should be done. So there is a discovery phase to identify potential candidates for automation. We first identify processes and then activities in those processes. We then understand the nature of those activities or tasks and see if there is a possibility of complete automation is a straight through, or some of those activities still need human intervention, or there are few activities which are like taking multiple data points into consideration, making sense of multiple things, and then deciding and taking action. So what is really interesting is that in a modern BPM-led approach, the discovery phase allows process champions to do a cost-benefit analysis. The cost-benefit analysis is assisted by advanced analytics that uses historical data, peak load situation, possible exceptions, and so many other parameters to give them insights such as, what are those low-hanging fruits? Where will the automation give the maximum benefit to the overall process? And based on this benefit analysis, they can select the activities that are best suited to be replaced through bots. And then they can follow, the subsequent steps like designing, deploying, and monitoring those bots, monitoring the performance of, together monitoring the performance of both human steps as well as bot steps. So with that said, this is how we have brought both these two technologies together. And this is where we think that it is best, it can help best to achieve operational excellence. The process simulator, which is a part of our IBPS RPM suite, is now extended and enhanced to identify opportunities for creating bot. The process designer, which is a modeling environment where the business administrators, the developers can create, design a process, create user interfaces, design a form, is now augmented with the capabilities like creating a bot workstep, deploying it as like a human workstep, and then monitoring it in a unified way. A comprehensive studios, there are multiple options here, but the comprehensive RPA studios are integrated with the BPM environment, where the scripts for invasive and non-invasive integrations can be written. A fresh RPA control center is built for deployment, monitoring of bots, and reporting their activities as part of overall process visibility on BAM dashboard. I'll explain this. These are really important. So here is the first thing, the process simulator, which I was talking about the discovery phase. Now, so simulator is a tool that simulates business process prior to their deployment, and it can use things like what if analysis, and it can produce really interesting heat maps, give insights using analytics into things like the major bottlenecks in the process. And it can help in two ways. One is to identify potential candidates for automation. So for example, if I can just highlight this. So here is a process where there are multiple people working. It is taking too much of time, and the SLA adherence is also low. So this is how it can identify and tell you that this might be a potential candidate for automation using bots. But once we replace it through bot, it becomes really interesting to see and run this simulation again and see that are we ended up in shifting the bottleneck somewhere else. Now with the help of this bots, if they are able to process those tasks really faster, is that these transactions are getting stuck at some other step. So what the process champions can do is that they can rerun, they can reiterate on the process optimization, and they can really keep the objective as the end-to-end process improvement. And within that context, they can see that, how much benefit are they getting from automating a step as a bot. And the simulation environment can also give them reports in terms of, ROI. So what was the turnaround time before this automation? What could be the turnaround time after the automation is done? So they can really, once they are done with satisfactory levels with load analysis, average SLA, average cost, resource usage, they can really, take it to the next level and take it to production. Now here is the modular environment. Now the business analyst and developer really need a proper framework to design and deploy processes that include bot. Process modeler gives a framework for bot to operate on a work step. Bot can access and operate on data model. It can access rules. It can work with forms. It can fully replace repetitive forms. And if you can see here, there's a bot work step which is equivalent to the human work step out here. And the framework is enabled with capabilities such as natural language processing, NLP, content analytics, federation, to enable developer build complex cognitive bots that we will cover in some more details in subsequent slides. Now with this bot and human work step work together, and it is extremely important to keep the overall process improvement as an objective rather than improvement in the individual activity, and this will ensure that we are not ending up with any chaos in the context of a process automation. Now, for the example, for the sake of illustrating it, I have taken an example. It is UiPath Studio, and you can see that all the BPM, it is directly connected to the BPM. Some of the commonly used functions are exposed here as a script. Business administrators and developer can directly use them along with other scripts such as opening a browser, launching a URL, then fetching some data from there and creating the work items on behalf. So it is we have made it really simple to create a non-invasive scripts which can connect multiple systems together with our BPM backbone. And here is the control center. Now you can see from here that it gives real-time visibility into the performance of bots, right from their deployment, run management, monitoring, everything can be managed through a unified interface. Now I will highlight some of our experience in terms of doing POCs and developing systems for public sector organizations, which is with the combined capabilities of BPM and RPA. Now, before I get into the use cases one by one, I would like to just give some data points around the different type of bots. So, a bot which can automate simple repetitive work, bulk repetitive work, such as data entry, workflow initiation from batch files, cross-checking data with other systems, downloading and uploading data from systems to a website or to a portal. And there are complex examples where bot really needs cognitive capabilities. It needs federation to go to multiple systems, take the data. It has to use the analytics capabilities, the content analytics, really getting into document, understanding the type of the document, using NLP to understand the sentiments of a text, and machine learning to keep improving itself. So we will highlight some examples of both type of bots. So here's the first example, an example of account opening process where with the help of the streamlines you can see that there are bots in one swim lane and there are human activities in another swim lane. So invoice can come. It is an example of back office process. The invoice can come from portal in physical form or through email. Bot can assist in creating work items, and this is where I want to highlight very interesting capabilities of this bot, which can extract data in an intelligent way. It understands the legend-based restrictions, so it eliminates the need for either having a standard invoice format for all the vendors, or to the other extreme, having so many templates to be created as there are vendors. And it can really then, learn over a period of time. So suppose, there is an error in extraction, it goes to human intervention, and once it is corrected, the bot understands what correction is done, and it takes it into account for the next time. The bot can go to ERP, such as SAP, can fetch the information based on PO number, DRM, can do the three-way matching, once it is approved by the department, it can then post it to the ERP again for payment run. And it can be done without using APIs as well. So it can be done in a non-invasive way. So another interesting example that I would like to take is around citizen-centric services. And think of it as a design pattern. It applies to most of such processes, such as grants management, permit issuances and taking certificate issuance. So many things that government organizations have to offer as a service to citizen or business. The application can come in the form of a form filling on the portal. It can come in physical form. It can also come on an email. Bot can replace the first level checker, which otherwise is done by human. It can really do the eligibility check. It can cross-check all the necessary supporting attachments. And in a more sophisticated form of the bot, it can also understand what document type it is. So it can get into the document, it can read through document, it can understand whether it is ID proof or it is some other supporting document. It can even go to an extent of extracting date information, suppose from ID proof, and can also understand whether it is valid or it is maybe an expired document. It can then also trigger an email, send it to the respective initiator and seek more clarification or seek some supplementary documentation. So once this step is done, it can move to next step, which maybe, is for the governance of the process. Here it is, in this example, it is the inspection, which was mandatory to be done in the physical form. Then once it is approved by the department head, there is another bot, which again does really interesting things, like pulling out data from this system, the data which is entered, pulling out data from other core system, creating a certificate or permit, and signing it on behalf of the system. So it can put a digital signature on behalf of system, and then it can either send it for printing or email it to the initiator. Last example that I wanted to highlight, I'm taking example from our experience in the banking domain, but it's really applicable for a lot of government departments which are dealing with business and citizens. So citizen and business which are coming in onto their portal and putting their feedback, you can think of it in that context. So there is a it is the example in the context of the citizen-centric service itself. So somebody has sent it an email or has put it some comment on the portal where there is a discontent in terms of not receiving the permit even after having sent all the supporting documents well. Now the bot, which is augmented with NLP, can understand the sentiment, can mark it. You can see here, the bot can understand the sentiment, categorizing it in severity, and also finding out what is the category of this incoming information. Is it a complaint? And some other example, it can be query. In some other example, it can also be a lead. And then assigning it to proper stakeholder, which can take it further, which can then, look into it, can address the concern, can also respond to. There can be automated response, but some human can also then respond to the initiator. Now, so we have done a lot of work in this space, and we have really, gained good experience in terms of helping our customers with their roadmap in the context of process automation. How should they use the RPA to maximize the benefit that they get? And things like, we see a lot of customers coming out with the RFPs or tenders around grants management. And it is again an interesting area where RPA and BPM capabilities can be used. Some examples that are worth highlighting here is eligibility check bot, where what it can do is that it can understand the profile of the applicant. It can use the rule engine of BPM. It can really combine these two information and then limit the options provided to the applicant only where he is eligible to. And he can then, the bots can really use the legacy applications well for doing the credential check, for doing so as a checkpoint in terms of the information provided by the citizen. And it can really help our customers to protect their investment they have done in legacy applications which are not supporting any modern form of integration through API. And exchanging information can be done using the non-invasive integrations which are supported. There are some more use cases that we are highlighting. I think this information will be available to you, and we will be happy to help you with understanding if there is an area which is of more interest. So these are some examples of our global customers. We are using the tech. Primarily, they are the users of our BPM platform. These are some customers in Singapore. Darshak, I think with this we can open it for question and answer.
Sure, Arpan. Thank you. So we got 2 questions so far. I think first question is for Craig. Do we need any additional knowledge workers, from human resource perspective to manage RPA part of the technology?
Yes, you need support in a number of areas for the automation. So I mentioned in the operating model that you need designers, which can be in the business to design bots. You need, tech management staff to control the bots and to monitor their performance. And then on the HR side and corporate services, there is a change management point to all of this, that once you start introducing the notion of a digital worker or a robot or a software robot into an organization, you need to communicate that properly to the staff that's going to be affected. In most organizations I talk to, they're not replacing people as much as reducing outside dependence on staff augmentation or business process outsourcing support. But all the jobs are restructured in some sense. So you need to be aware of that. You need to do the training and so forth to make what's going to be a long path of more advanced automation like this. So it does require a kind of a multifaceted support from different parts of the organization.
Thank you, Craig. Arpan, we have next question for you. It's basically, is there any advice in balancing the grants of access or rights or permissions for the bots? Basically, the person who has asked the question, he has also put a note saying that stakeholders are, kind of concerned with robots being too powerful in the whole scheme of process automation.
Right. I think
for me,
Craig highlighted this concern. Yeah, go ahead. Craig, if you want to take up this question.
No, go ahead. Take it.
Sure. So what I was saying is that, during the presentation, Craig highlighted this concern around the security and how to put guardrails around what a bot can do and what a bot should not do. So I think this is what actually I was also saying during the use case that I was highlighting with the help of grants management as an example. So if you use this in combination with DPM, where the rules are isolated, audited in a separate rule engine, and then use bot for automating those activities, I think there are some guardrails that are there. But I think it has to go through all the necessary audit before it is productionized in terms of what a bot can do and what it cannot do. So this has to be audited properly by the business champions as per the need for the organization, as per the regulatory compliances. That has to be. This is an important checkpoint that has to be part of the validation before it goes to the production.
Craig, did you have a comment on that?
No. I think that's that's right. I mean, you have to have discussions pretty early with your compliance and legal department about how you're using the digital workers. And it's complicated for them because they've built, a way to report on and monitor the existing process from a compliance standpoint. They have external auditors, perhaps, that have approved a certain way they're doing a process. And you start to say, well, we're going to have these automations dispatched from this virtual machine that's going to be doing some of this work, and it's very hard for them to get a handle on what that means, particularly as you look at how sophisticated some of the scheduling and deployment of these automations are. You can have a multi-skilled bot that's able to handle 3 or 4 different tasks that might be on 100 different desktops. So trying to get an understanding of how the bot's operating and what it's doing is difficult. And as the bots get more intelligent, then and you start to have decisions that are made by the bots that are more than the ones that the first generation, the 5 decisions you had, in the first generation. As you start to bring in, AI and machine learning to make some decisions, then it becomes more opaque, is a term you're hearing a lot more, and it introduces all kinds of issues about: am I introducing bias? Am I how do I determine how this machine learning algorithm that the bot is leveraging, how did it actually make a decision? So you can certainly see some more issues down the road, but right now I think the bots are doing things that are pretty understandable. They're deterministic and they're pretty transparent. So right now I think we're okay, but I think it's going to get more tricky over time.
Right. So I think that brings us to the end of the session. I would like to thank you, Arpan and Craig, both for the presentations and valuable insights. And also thanks to the entire audience for your valuable time and, starting your day with us. Goodbye and have a great day ahead. And once again, Craig, thanks and very good night. Thank you all.
Thank you.